At 5:41 in the morning, high above the Strait of Hormuz, a warning tone breaks the quiet inside the cockpit. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is sharp enough to make any trained pilot pause for a fraction of a second. A US F-35 Lightning II is moving through international airspace on what began as a routine patrol. Outside the canopy, the world still looks calm. The water below is smooth, the first light of morning stretches across the strait, and lines of civilian vessels continue their slow movement through one of the most important shipping corridors on the planet. But inside the aircraft, the situation changes instantly. A radar spike appears on the tactical display from the northeast. At first, it could be ordinary surveillance activity, the kind of coastal radar presence that is common in this region. Nothing about it demands an immediate reaction. Then the signal changes. A broad search pattern becomes more focused, the energy tightens. The tracking becomes cleaner, more deliberate, and far more personal. The pilot does not overreact. In an aircraft like the F-35, panic is just wasted movement. He checks the display again, confirms the direction of the signal, studies the geometry, and keeps the jet steady for a few more seconds. That is all the time he needs. The radar is no longer simply scanning the sky. It is following him, measuring distance, reading speed, holding his position. Somewhere beyond the coastline, someone has decided that this F-35 is no longer just another contact over the strait. It has become the main focus. Below, the Strait of Hormuz still looks almost peaceful. Tankers move in slow, organized lines. Commercial traffic continues as if nothing has changed. The sunlight grows stronger over the water, but in the cockpit, the mood is completely different. The F-35 begins building the picture faster than any older aircraft could do manually. A coastal emitter. High confidence. One airborne contact lifting from the northern side of the strait. Speed increasing, altitude rising. Direction consistent with an intercept. This is how modern pressure in the air begins. Not with a dramatic explosion, not with a long radio argument, not even with a visible aircraft in front of the canopy. First comes the lock. The pilot nudges the aircraft a few degrees left. It is not enough to look like a sharp defensive move. It is just enough to test the signal. If the radar contact is incidental, the pattern may drift away. It does not. The signal holds. He eases the jet slightly lower, trims the power, and watches again. The radar continues following. Whatever is painting the aircraft is adjusting with him. That means intent. He keys the radio once. His voice is calm, clipped, and controlled. Control, Lightning 1. Confirm higher grade tracking from Iranian sector. Possible coordinated air picture developing. The reply comes back quickly. External sensors are also seeing increased activity near the coast. One fast-moving aircraft is now airborne and heading south toward the patrol corridor. No friendly traffic is in that block. No response on standard guard frequencies. No indication of normal deconfliction. No one says the obvious out loud. They do not have to. A fighter rising under a live coastal radar picture in this part of the world means pressure is about to become direct. Inside the F-35, the pilot begins shifting into a more protective profile without announcing it. Emissions stay disciplined. Movements stay clean. The aircraft descends a little lower, making it harder for ground radar to hold a clean picture against the open sky. The jet's sensors keep feeding him pieces of the truth. A heat signature far off the right rear quarter. Intermittent shape cues in the distance. A track file becoming stronger every second. Iranian fighter. Type still uncertain. Maybe an older platform. Maybe something faster. At this point, the label matters less than the geometry. It is moving into position while the coastal radar continues doing the heavy lifting. That combination is what changes everything. A fighter by itself can apply pressure. A radar by itself can warn and watch. But together, they can create a very serious problem. The F-35 banks again, a little harder this time, then slips lower over the water. It is not a dramatic break. It is not a desperate dive. It is a clean, efficient reposition designed to complicate the picture behind him. He keeps the nose moving, never too much, never too little. Just enough to deny the other side a stable answer. Every second matters now. Every angle matters. And through all of it, the aircraft is collecting information. Pulse patterns, sweep behavior, timing between the coastal radar and the airborne contact. The pilot is not only managing the encounter, he is recording it. Then the second change comes. The warning tone returns faster and sharper than before. This is the kind of shift no experienced pilot mistakes for routine behavior. The airborne contact has moved into a more aggressive intercept line. The radar energy from the Iranian side tightens again, as if both parts of the picture have finally aligned. The F-35's display now shows a clearer threat correlation. Ground support below, fighter above and behind. This is not a random shadow. It is a coordinated attempt to pin the American aircraft inside a controlled pressure zone. The pilot exhales once, hard, and keeps flying. Outside the canopy, the strait remains crowded with merchant traffic and morning light. Inside the cockpit, the margin for error is shrinking by the second. The F-35 cuts lower over the water, turns left again, and adds just enough speed to stay ahead of the geometry forming behind it. He still has not seen the Iranian fighter with his own eyes. He does not need to. The aircraft already has. And now one fact is impossible to ignore. Iran is no longer simply watching this patrol. They are trying to control it. At 5:44 local time, the F-35 is no longer flying a simple patrol line. It is low over the Strait of Hormuz now, faster than before, no slightly offset from its original path, holding just enough room to remain unpredictable. Below, the shipping lane is full of civilian movement. Tankers, escort vessels, and merchant ships continue through the narrow waterway in steady commercial lines, unaware of how quickly the airspace above them has changed. Inside the cockpit, the tactical picture is getting cleaner, and none of it looks accidental. The coastal radar is still active, still disciplined, still painting the aircraft. But now the airborne contact has become the real problem. The Iranian fighter is climbing into a better intercept position, sliding in from the north and right, using the support of the ground radar to tighten the setup. That is a dangerous combination. One platform sees wide, the other closes fast. Together, they can pressure even an advanced aircraft into making a bad decision. The F-35 pilot refuses to give them one. He keeps the jet moving with small, efficient corrections. No wild turns, no sudden climb, no obvious retreat, just controlled changes in heading and altitude, enough to keep the other side from settling comfortably into position. In an older aircraft, this kind of moment would force a pilot to divide attention between radar, radio, instruments, and visual scanning. But inside the Lightning II, the aircraft does much of that work with him. The sensors are already fusing the problem. The pilot's job is to manage space, timing, and intent. A new tone flickers through the threat system. Not a confirmed launch, not yet, but stronger than before. The Iranian picture is tightening. Control, Lightning I. Air contact now committed. Ground support remains active. Tracking behavior escalating. The answer comes back with more weight than before. Additional U.S. assets are beginning to pivot toward the strait. A broader air picture is forming outside the immediate area. For the moment, though, the F-35 remains the only aircraft inside the pressure zone. It is still the aircraft Iran is trying to move. The pilot drops a little lower. At this altitude, the sea becomes part of the equation. Ground-based radar has to work harder against clutter and reflection. The F-35's shape, its careful signature management, and its disciplined emissions all matter more here. The aircraft skims through a thin layer of air between order and chaos. Engine steady. Control inputs minimal. The message is simple. You are not pushing this jet around. Then the Iranian fighter makes its first serious move. The contact angles in more sharply, trying to shift from pursuit into a position that could force the F-35 westward into a cleaner tracking lane or upward into easier radar exposure. It is textbook pressure, not a direct strike, not even a visible confrontation yet, just geometry. The kind of geometry that forces a pilot to choose between bad options if he sees the board too late. But the F-35 sees it early. The pilot shifts left again, subtly lowers the nose, then eases back into level flight. The move is small, but it breaks the rhythm Iran is trying to build. The fighter behind him has to correct. That correction matters. It reveals timing. It reveals urgency. It reveals how badly the intercept pilot wants to own the next minute of airspace. And every reveal is being captured. Inside the F-35, the electronic warfare systems are quietly cataloging the behavior coming from both the coast and the aircraft behind. Sweep intervals, signal strength, timing changes, handoff logic. The pilot is under pressure, yes, but Iran is also giving away pieces of its playbook every second this continues. That is the hidden edge in a fifth-generation encounter. The aircraft does not only endure the pressure, it studies the pressure while it is happening. For a brief moment, the Iranian fighter draws close enough for the Lightning sensors to sharpen the track further. Still no visual contact through the canopy, still no dramatic close pass. Just data becoming confidence. Iranian fast mover, aggressive approach, coordinated with coastal radar, trying to herd, not simply observe. Then comes the next escalation. A short radio transmission cuts across the frequency. The voice is hard, clipped, and direct. No complete identification, no real attempt at normal deconfliction, just a warning to leave the area immediately. The F-35 pilot does not answer with a debate. He stays focused on the sky. Because the radio call is not the real issue, the positioning is. By 5:46, the Iranian fighter is close enough that every choice matters faster than before. The ground radar continues to support. The intercept line keeps tightening. For the first time, the pilot can feel the encounter moving toward a threshold neither side can safely misunderstand. One more aggressive cut in, one more jump in tracking quality, one more bad read, and the incident stops being pressure and becomes something far more serious. That is when the tactical picture shifts again. From outside the immediate area, new blue tracks begin to appear on the F-35's networked display. Distant at first, then steadier. U.S. support is moving, not yet inside the center of the encounter, but close enough to matter. Close enough that the Iranian pilot, if he is watching carefully, may already understand that this is no longer one American jet alone over Hormuz. The F-35 holds its line for 2 more seconds, low and fast above the water. Iran thought it was closing on a single aircraft. It is about to learn that the sky around that aircraft is starting to close back. At 5:47 local time, the chase stops looking like a chase. The U.S. F-35 is still low over the Strait of Hormuz, still fast, still holding a narrow ribbon of air above the water where radar solutions are harder to stabilize and visual reads come late. But the aircraft is no longer reacting one move at a time. It is shaping the encounter. Inside the cockpit, the pilot sees the change before anyone says it over the radio. The Iranian fighter behind him is still pressing. The coastal radar is still active. But the geometry is no longer flowing in only one direction. Now the sky is starting to fill in. Across the F-35's fused display, distant blue tracks become more useful. American assets outside the immediate pressure zone have moved close enough to influence the calculation. A wider surveillance picture is feeding into the scene. Somewhere beyond visual range, U.S. air power is repositioning. Somewhere farther out and lower, naval sensors are helping stitch the entire picture together. No one rushes in, no one makes a dramatic announcement. But from this moment on, Iran is no longer dealing with a single stealth aircraft in isolation. It is operating inside a layered American battle space. The Iranian pilot either notices that change or he does not. His next move suggests he notices something, but not enough. Instead of backing away, he pushes harder. The intercept line tightens again from the F-35's right rear quarter. His angle becomes more ambitious, the kind of movement designed to make the American pilot feel boxed in without openly crossing the final line. That is the game now. Pressure without commitment, dominance without the full step. The Iranian fighter wants the F-35 to turn away first, climb out of its low profile, or abandon the patrol corridor and head west. Any of those outcomes would be enough. They would not need to bring the aircraft down. They would only need to make it leave. But the F-35 gives them nothing. The pilot rolls gently left, then steadies. No wasted energy, no theatrical move. Just enough movement to force the pursuing fighter to adjust its nose and spend a little more speed. From far away, that correction might seem minor. Inside a tactical picture, it says everything. It reveals timing. It reveals intent. It reveals how aggressively the Iranian pilot is trying to cut the corner. And the F-35 records all of it. Every sweep of Iranian radar, every change in closure rate. Every moment, the airborne track leans on support from the coast. The aircraft's electronic warfare and sensor suite continue building a clearer and clearer library of Iranian behavior. This is the part most people never see. In modern air operations, the first advantage is often information. Before anyone fires, before aircraft even come close enough for the public to imagine a traditional showdown. One side may already be learning more than the other can afford to reveal. Iran keeps revealing. The pursuing fighter now flies with more urgency, trying to regain the initiative before American support moves too close. On the F-35's display, the track quality is strong enough now to show a pattern. The Iranian aircraft is more confident when the coastal radar remains steady and less decisive when the geometry becomes fluid. That matters. It means the pilot behind him is not simply improvising. He is flying inside a structure. He is leaning on cues. And if those cues are disrupted, his leverage shrinks quickly. At 5:48, another short burst of radio traffic cuts in. Another warning, another demand to leave the area. Same clip tone, same attempt to sound in control. The F-35 pilot ignores the theater and watches the angles because that is where the real conversation is happening. The Iranian fighter makes its boldest move yet, edging farther into an attack support position and trying to force the American jet toward a cleaner slice of sky. For a few seconds, the encounter tightens to its most dangerous point. The F-35 is low. The Iranian contact is committed. The coastal radar continues painting from inland. If there is a moment when this incident could move from intimidation into a real crisis, this is it. And still, the F-35 does not panic. The pilot keeps the aircraft disciplined and quiet, turns just enough to spoil the setup, and stays on a line that refuses to offer an easy answer. That matters psychologically as much as tactically. Iran expected visible discomfort by now. A hard defensive turn, a sharp climb, a retreat, some sign that the pressure was working. Instead, the American jet remains controlled, still there, still capable, still refusing to be herded. That is when the chase begins to stall. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just in the subtle way, high-level tactical moments change direction. The Iranian fighter starts spending more effort for smaller gains. Its corrections become more frequent. Its approach angles stop improving. It is still behind the F-35, still present, still a concern, but it is no longer dictating the shape of the encounter. And by now, that shift is impossible to miss. Additional American tracks have moved closer on the shared tactical picture. Not close enough to turn the moment into a larger confrontation, but close enough to make the next Iranian decision heavier than the last one. Press farther, and the encounter expands. Hold position, and the moment slips away. Back off, and the entire attempt starts to look exactly like what it is: a failed effort to push a U.S. stealth fighter out of international airspace. At 5:49, the Iranian pilot eases his angle slightly. Barely noticeable unless you are watching the geometry in real time. But the F-35 sees it. The pressure line has loosened. The hunt is no longer tightening. It is turning. Iran tried to corner one aircraft over Hormuz. Instead, it has flown straight into the outer edge of an American response already building around it. At 5:50 local time, the most dangerous part of the encounter is no longer speed. It is silence. For several minutes, the airspace above the Strait of Hormuz has been shaped by pressure, angle, and restraint. No dramatic exchange, no visible clash close enough for the world to call it a dogfight. Just a U.S. F-35 Lightning II flying low over international waters, an Iranian fighter pressing from behind, and a coastal radar network trying to turn presence into control. Now, for the first time since the initial lock, the momentum begins to slip. Not quickly, not cleanly, but enough. Inside the F-35, the pilot sees it in the geometry before he feels it in the warning picture. The Iranian fighter is still there, still aft and offset, still serious enough that no one relaxes for a second. But the angle is no longer improving. The closure is less efficient. The corrections are becoming more cautious. That matters. In this kind of encounter, a pilot who believes he controls the sky keeps pressing. A pilot who begins seeing new variables starts protecting his exit. The coastal radar is still active, but even that picture is changing. Its behavior loses some of the sharpness that defined the earlier phase of the intercept. The tracking quality does not disappear, but it no longer feels like a system building toward a clean solution. It feels more like a system maintaining contact while someone higher up decides how far this should really go. That is the weakness of coercive air pressure in a place like Hormuz. It works only as long as the other side accepts the script. The F-35 never did. Below, the traffic lane is still moving. Tankers continue their slow transit through one of the narrowest strategic choke points on Earth. The sea remains flat and metallic in the morning light, giving no sign of how close the air above it came to crossing a line neither side could easily walk back. That contrast matters. At sea level, order. Just above it, a few minutes of controlled instability that could have changed the entire morning. The F-35 does not chase the moment. That is what separates disciplined air power from emotional air power. The American pilot now has support moving closer. He has a stronger recognized picture. He has passed through the heaviest phase of the pressure without giving Iran the outcome it wanted. But he does not turn that into a reckless counter-push. He stays low, stays efficient, stays exactly where he has every legal right to be. The aircraft continues to collect, continues to watch, and continues to make the Iranian fighter choose between escalation and exit. And that choice is starting to weigh. At 5:51, the Iranian aircraft shifts its vector by a few degrees. Not a full turn away, not yet. But enough to open the line instead of tightening it. Enough to create breathing room where, seconds earlier, there had been none. The F-35's fused display marks the change instantly. The pilot does not respond with aggression. He holds his course long enough to confirm the pattern. There it is again. The Iranian pilot is trying to reduce the pressure without making it look like a retreat. That is common in military encounters where image matters as much as force. You do not abruptly pull away if you can avoid it. You widen your angle, you reduce closure, you shift from pressure geometry to parallel presence. You make the move look procedural, almost routine, as if this had only been observation from the beginning. But systems do not care about pride. Systems record motion, timing, and distance. And right now, every marker says the same thing. The intercept is losing its bite. A final burst of radio traffic comes through, thinner this time, less certain than before. Another warning, another insistence that the American aircraft leave the area. But by now, the words are behind the reality. The Iranian fighter is no longer dictating anything. It is preserving distance. The F-35 remains steady. No dramatic display, no sharp climb, no celebration, just composure. The kind of composure that turns a failed pressure move into something far more damaging than embarrassment. It turns it into evidence. At 5:52, the threat picture softens again. The airborne contact drifts farther out of its most dangerous position. The coastal radar remains present, but its role has changed from pressing to watching. The entire encounter has crossed its invisible midpoint. Iran can still remain in the area. It can still observe. It can still claim presence. But the attempt to control the American aircraft's movement has failed. That is the moment the outcome becomes clear. Iran tried to pressure a fifth-generation fighter over Hormuz using layered tracking, an airborne intercept, and the psychological weight of proximity. They expected discomfort. They expected deviation. They expected the patrol to break west and leave the corridor. It never happened. By 5:53, the Iranian fighter opens the spacing once more. This time, there is no ambiguity left. The geometry is no longer offensive in character. It is disengaging in everything but name. The F-35, still low and clean over the water, stays on mission long enough to make the point unmistakable. It was not driven out. It was not boxed in. It was not forced off its line. The lock failed. The pressure failed, and the aircraft Iran tried to intimidate is still exactly where it started, over international waters, under control, and fully operational. At 5:55 local time, the sky over the Strait of Hormuz is quiet again. Not peaceful, quiet. The difference matters. The US F-35 Lightning II is still airborne, still on a legal patrol track over international waters, still holding a clean line above one of the most strategically sensitive waterways on Earth. The Iranian fighter that had pressed from the north has opened distance. The coastal radar that once tightened into a high-intensity track is still present, but no longer driving the encounter. The immediate danger has passed. The mission has not. Inside the cockpit, there is no celebration, no breathless radio traffic, no dramatic declaration that the threat is over. That is not how professional military aviation works. The pilot reports the facts in exact clipped language. Tracking pressure reduced. Iranian air contact widening separation. Aircraft stable. Sensors recording. Still on station. And that final part is the message. Still on station. Because in a confrontation like this, survival alone is not the whole outcome. Presence is. Discipline is. The ability to absorb pressure without surrendering the airspace is what separates a tense moment from a tactical win. Iran did not need to bring down the F-35 to gain something useful that morning. It only needed to force it out of the corridor, to make an American stealth fighter break off its patrol and leave the sky over Hormuz under pressure. That would have been enough. Enough for a headline. Enough for a claim of control. Enough to argue that layered radar coverage, an aggressive intercept, and a few minutes of sustained pressure could bend even a fifth-generation aircraft. But it did not happen. Instead, what Iran produced in those 14 minutes was something far more useful to the United States than to itself. Data. Every radar sweep from the coast, every change in mode, every moment when ground tracking supported the airborne intercept, every closure rate, angle correction, and pursuit decision from the Iranian fighter, every clipped radio warning. Every second of timing between the ground picture and the air picture, the F-35 absorbed it all. That is one of the defining truths of modern American air power. The aircraft is not just a fighter. It is a sensor node, an intelligence collector, and a real-time historian of the battle space. You do not pressure a platform like that without teaching it something, and Iran taught it plenty. They showed how quickly a coastal radar network could shift from surveillance into a more focused tracking posture. They showed how their airborne interceptor behaved when it believed it had the initiative. They showed how closely the fighter relied on support from the ground picture. And they showed what happened when the geometry stopped cooperating. At first, the Iranian pilot was assertive, almost confident, pushing angles that suggested he believed the American aircraft would eventually turn away. But as U.S. support moved closer and the F-35 refused to break, the posture changed. The corrections became smaller, the pressure became less efficient, the intercept began to look less like control and more like exposure. That is the hidden defeat in encounters like this. Not the failure to fire, the failure to dominate. By 5:57, the F-35 continues along the patrol corridor for a final stretch before repositioning out of the most compressed threat zone. The sea traffic below remains uninterrupted. Tankers keep moving. Civilian vessels keep threading the strait. Nothing has fallen from the sky. No emergency response is racing toward the water. No burning wreckage marks the surface. To outside eyes, almost nothing happened. But for the people who understand these missions, a great deal happened. Iran tested the boundary. They used radar pressure, an intercepting fighter, and the narrow geography of Hormuz to see whether they could push a U.S. stealth aircraft out of contested airspace without ever taking the final step. They came close enough to make the danger real. Close enough to force tactical responses. Close enough to place a pilot inside the kind of compressed timeline where every second matters and every choice becomes permanent. But when the moment arrived to either escalate or accept failure, they did what coercive powers often do when discipline meets them head-on. They backed down slowly, not dramatically, not publicly, but unmistakably. The American aircraft never gave them a clean opportunity, never gave them a panicked retreat, never gave them the visual proof of dominance they were trying to manufacture. And because of that, the final image of the encounter is not an Iranian fighter driving a U.S. jet from the sky over Hormuz. It is an F-35, still intact, still in control, still flying its mission while the pressure around it fades. That is the lesson. In the modern battle space, the side that stays calm often takes home more than the side that tries to sound powerful. Iran tried to force the issue over one of the most volatile choke points on the planet. They tried to turn tracking into fear and fear into movement. Instead, they handed a fifth-generation aircraft a clearer map of their own behavior and walked away without the one thing they came for: control. So here's the real question. Was this a genuine attempt to set up a direct confrontation, or was it a pressure play that went one step too far? And if Iran had held that lock just a few seconds longer, how different would that morning have become? Share your take in the comments. Because over Hormuz, Iran tried to make the F-35 blink first. It never did.